I have a real question. In the follow-up section of the show notes, I put a link, and I'm trying to figure out how it's follow-up.
Yeah, I don't know either.
"35 of 37 economists say Trump is wrong. The other two misread the question." Oh, okay. Here we go. President Trump's administration says his tax cuts will pay for it themselves. It turns out it's really hard to find an economist who agrees.
We talked about how these tax cuts would be revenue neutral.
Yeah.
That's the follow-up.
Yeah, in a previous episode of Everything We Know About the American Heartland, check the show notes. We talked about tax cuts, whether you can have. Anyway, the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business regularly polls economists on controversial questions. In a survey the school published last week, only 2 out of 37 economists said that the tax cuts would stimulate the economy enough to cancel out the effect of total tax revenue. Those 2 economists now said they made a mistake, that they misunderstood the question. Quote, "I screwed up that one," said one of those 2 economists, Kenneth Judd. "I meant to say that this is a horrible idea, a bad idea, no chance in hell." The other respondent who said that Trump's tax cuts would pay for themselves was Bengt Holmstrom of MIT, who confirmed in an email to the Washington Post that he had also misread the question.
How do you misread? How poorly worded of a question was this? That you intended to say it's terrible.
How do we know that any one of those 35 didn't read the question correctly and actually wanted to say that Trump's plan was great?
True. See, the Washington Post, as a liberal news organization, just didn't ask those types of questions.
Here's the text of the question. "The tax reform plan proposed by President Trump this week would likely pay for itself through higher economic growth." How do you misread that question?
Is it agree or disagree? Like, what is it?
Yeah, then you get strongly agree, uncertain, disagree, and strongly disagree. 5%, the 2 people said strongly agree, 0% said agree, 0% said uncertain, 17% disagree, and 67% strongly disagree.
Well, maybe they didn't read the "and", because it would probably stimulate the economy, but it would probably not pay for. It will not pay for itself.
Dang! If you scroll down, people can leave comments. Okay, this is cool. Wait, this might be useful for our country. David Autor at MIT. "I'm not sure it should be called a plan because it's so devoid of content. But absent offsetting tax increases, it would be a fiscal disaster." Wow. Really nitpicking here. Okay, Austin Goolsbee, University of Chicago. "No, but it would put us in the running for a National Darwin Award."
Nice.
Michael Greenstone. "It wasn't a fleshed out plan, but based on what was announced, the probability that it will increase the deficit is very high."
Yeah, not really surprising, I guess.
Oh, okay. So so Bengt Holmstrom, one of the 2 people who accidentally wrote strongly agree. Here's the comment he wrote after writing strongly agree. "There's no detailed plan. We'll never see the counterfactual. This is my best guess." The other one, Kenneth Judge, wrote, "Removing state tax deduction will raise educational tax burdens that will hurt growth." So neither of these people wrote comments that are sort of consistent with strongly agreeing.
Yeah. That's why you need to read the comments, dude. You can't just go with the headlight, or the headline, so to speak. Should we do it, dude? Should we just go ahead and talk about the French?
Wait.
About Emmanuel Macron?
No, we've got... Richard, are you looking in the show notes?
Oh, around the news.
We've got... this is an interesting story in the news. Trump invented the phrase priming the pump.
Did you guys see the tweet from Merriam-Webster's dictionary fact-checking that?
Didn't they found uses of it going back 100 years or something?
Yeah. And I wonder if anyone did a Google Ngram search.
There's so many uses for Google that I'm learning about today.
Here's the transcript. So Donald Trump had an interview with The Economist, and Donald Trump says, "We have to prime the pump." The Economist says, "It's very Keynesian." Donald Trump says, "We are the highest taxed nation in the world. Have you heard that expression before for this particular type of an event? Priming the pump?" The Economist says, "Yes." "Have you heard of it?" The Economist, "Yes." Donald Trump. Have you heard that expression used before? Because I haven't heard it. I mean, I came up with it a couple days ago, and I thought it was good.
Okay, so
it's no. I think afterwards is even funnier. It's what you have to do. Now the question is, does the "in" refer to you have to prime the pump, or you have to come up with expressions because enough of them don't exist? That's the real mystery.
Okay, here to me is the funniest part. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is like in the room. He's like sitting there with Trump. He's like he doesn't show up very often in the transcript. So the next line in the transcript to Steve Mnuchin is like, and as we talked about, economic growth under the blah, 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 blah. So priming the pump in the short term leads to growth. Like Steve Mnuchin is just like, okay, I'm going with it. He invented priming the pump. I'm going to use his words.
Yeah.
So
dude.
I just did a Google Ngram search, which is basically, Google scanned all those books and, allows you to search all of those books.
Oh, right.
And it's a histogram of how often the phrase or word appears throughout time. And if you search Google Ngram for priming the pump, you will find evidence of the phrase being used as early as 1886, with it peaking in the late 30s to early 40s.
So I'm not surprised that it peaks in the late 30s, right? Because of John Milton Keynes.
Does this make Trump a Keynesian?
I don't
think he understood that phrase.
The Goldman Sachs macro team are mostly Keynesian, and so I actually wouldn't be surprised if Mnuchin considered themselves to be Keynesian, or at the very least some sort of like Larry Summers type of person.
Based on this interview, I don't think he understands the word Keynesian.
No, Mnuchin does though.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. France had an election. Did you hear about this? Hear about this one?
Dude, this was so I don't know if we should start with this point or end with this point. But this was a pretty crazy week, I mean, France had an election. They elected this guy who's 39 years old, named Emmanuel Macron. What percentage of our listeners do you think know that this happened?
100%.
Probably 100.
All four of our
think so?
listeners know about this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is really quite high. I didn't realize we had 4 listeners, but I've enjoyed watching this election, and I enjoy Emmanuel Macron. I'm a fan, as I've told you guys. I'm a fan.
Why?
Dude. So he's an environmentalist. He's pro free market. But he's not an extremist. As I said, it's not like he wants to turn France into Kansas or anything like that. He just wants to very deliberately sort of make France better. Like there are some old laws that suck that are keeping the economy from achieving its full potential, and he's out there working on them. I think that's his.
So what are some examples of these laws that he wants to remove?
So fantastic, great question, Tom. So he wants to reform the 35-hour work week. There's some employment laws that
into what?
Probably
still
a 40-hour
work
week, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, France is going to go from a 35-hour work week to a 35-hour work week.
Well, what kind of reform is that? Seems
right?
Status quo.
No. It's going to change.
No, they are gonna have some neoliberal labor reforms.
Yeah. It's going to change what happens with overtime pay. They're going to let employers and employees work out what the arrangement would be over 35 hours. He has another proposal, which is to say if you do work more than 35 hours per week, your overtime will be tax-free. So to sort of encourage people to work more without necessarily changing the 35 hours.
That's the opposite of the purpose of overtime laws, right?
No.
The purpose of overtime laws is to cause employers to hire a second person for those extra hours. That's the whole reason why they have overtime laws.
That's one of them. The other is to sort of be fair to workers, right? I mean, that's another reason. Is to say that listen, if you're expected to work more than the normal amount, you get paid extra for it. But he's saying if you do work more, you get to keep it. It encourages work, right? I mean.
Okay, so we're talking about things he's going to do, things he's done. Who is this person? Where does he come from? So he was a member of France's center-left party. He was the Socialist Party finance minister under
economy minister, dude.
President.
Economy minister.
Isn't that the same thing?
No, I think the finance minister.
Dude, it's some French word. You're just translating it differently. No, hold on. We're gonna look this up. We're gonna settle this.
Ministers of Finance, 1944 to present. You can look on Wikipedia, and you will see that Emmanuel Macron was finance minister. Son of a bitch. He's finance minister.
He was in Francois Hollande's cabinet, and that he's never actually been elected to office before. He left the Socialist Party to form his own center-left party called En Marche, which translates to onward. I guess it's sort of good for him. So now that France has two center-left parties, one of them is in real dire straits. The socialists are having real problems. But I think this is the first time ever that the two leading candidates in the French presidential election didn't come from either of the two major parties. So Macron and Le Pen were the two highest vote receivers in the most recent French presidential election. Le Pen is a sort of neo right-wing populist, sort of racist, populist, anti-European, sort of fascist, sort of. Her dad's a real anti-Semite. Anyway, Macron beat Le Pen by about 30 points, and starting like next week, he is France's president. Oh, one last thing about being president of France. The president of France actually doesn't. Being a president in France is weird because the president has to appoint the prime minister, and the custom is that the prime minister comes from the majority party in the legislature, and the prime minister also sort of has a lot more control over domestic legislative agenda than the president. So the president is like a big figurehead and has a lot of responsibility for European and other foreign policy. But also, I mean, when we talk about Macron's domestic policy, the thing to keep in mind is that most likely he's going to have a conservative legislature, that they're probably just going to pass a big tax cut and then go home. So it's all sort of academic to talk about his domestic policy.
I think this goes well beyond taxes, AJ.
I'm sorry. What goes well beyond taxes? What the conservative legislature will do under Macron?
And what Macron wants to do.
Well, but who cares what Macron wants to do? He's going to have an opposite party legislature.
I think they agree with him on some of his labor reforms. That's an example of something. I mean, I think the outgoing French finance minister is talking about that.
So this is this is finance or economy?
Apparently finance.
So here's my big problem with Macron. And I mean, this is like a super hot take I read in Jacobin. So like, great, I mean, this is like some pretty far lefty thought, but he's basically this like neoliberal Blairite sort of figure, right? I mean, he's got like, oh, I'm going to deregulate labor markets. I'm going to cut the federal government's employee headcount by 120,000 employees, and I'm gonna deregulate all these industries or whatever. And this is just this sort of like this like neoliberal Blairite centrist sort of governance that I mean people never give liberal movements credit for the areas where they're centrist or conservative, and I mean they'll call Clinton a socialist, and they'll call Obama a socialist, and they'll call Macron a socialist, even as he deregulates everything in sight. And so on the right, there's never like any credit given for these sort of reforms to the extent that they're any good. And on the left, people just get upset. And so everybody gets totally dissatisfied with liberals when these sorts of things happen. AJ,
is that actually true in sort of France and in European countries? I know it's been true in the United States, but...
Yeah, of course. Right? I mean, it's been 20 years now, and labor still hasn't recovered from the Blair administration. That's 100% true.
All right. I mean, I guess I don't know that much about... I think another reason labor has problems, at least in Britain, is because they have really weak leadership, for one. And second, Blair was really unpopular for the Iraq War, like following George W. Bush down that path. I mean, that was something that he continues to be unpopular for. So I think there was, a pretty specific foreign policy reason that caused labor's unpopularity there, not just, he was a neoliberal.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, so go on talking about Macron, like domestic agenda. What do you got?
Yeah. So, I mean, so Macron's domestic agenda, I guess like the one thing that people should know about and should think about is that there was a big law that he passed, and it was so big that it was in fact called the Macron Law. And what it did is it changed some of the relationship between labor and employers. Basically, is what it did. Hold on, let me pull up just some reviews of the Macron Law and what it does. So it changes the way that employers can dismiss employees, right? It reduces a lot of the friction that they have to go through to dismiss an employee. It allows there are new rules to maintain job agreements. So in case of serious economic difficulties, employers have been allowed to conclude a fixed-term collective bargaining agreement. And so now they may do these bargaining agreements for 5 years instead of 2 years. It changes it creates a new or it modifies an employee savings scheme. It creates new procedures before the labor court. So that it's easier, again, to sort of fire employees, right? I think a lot of people probably don't know just how hard it is to fire someone in France. I can't say that I even fully appreciate it, but, if you live in Texas or you live in the United States, for most states, not every state, you can be fired at will. And that means that, your employer doesn't really have to do anything in order to fire you.
How does this party get to call itself the Socialist Party? Like, how does any party that moves this legislation get to call itself the even call itself the center left party?
Why?
Right?
But why are these laws bad? Like, what's your argument for why it should be this hard to fire someone?
Well, how hard is it to fire someone? Like, what are the hurdles that would have prevented an employer from firing someone before the Macron Law passed?
So I'll give you an example. So first of all, there are employment tribunal procedures. And so what this law did, for example, is it made that procedure a little bit quicker and more effective, allowing for an accelerated time frame on that decision. So, you've got to go before a tribunal in order to fire someone. You know what I mean?
For every firing?
I think so.
I don't know, dude. I mean,
what do you dislike about? I guess what do you love about French labor law, let's say, or any of the socialist policies that have been undertaken in France? What is it that's so good about it to you?
Look, I'm not going to claim to be an expert in French labor law, so I can tell you this is the right way to have your collectively organized labor bargain or form workers' councils or whatever, right? I'm not going to be able to get into the weeds with you on French labor law, but Macron's actual campaign where he's proposing budget cuts, he's proposing reductions in headcount for federal government payrolls, he's proposing some specific targeted investments that sort of, it's not as austerity minded as say the European center right has been, but I think it's still sort of 1990s Clinton or 2000s Blair sort of coalition of these anti-racist globalist sort of policies, but the economic populism that the far left wants to see is 100% not present in Blairite. On the far left in French, the widespread slogan is that Macron 2017 equals Le Pen 2022. Basically, the idea that this sort of continuously failing neoliberal contrived centrism ultimately leads to dissatisfaction to the left and creates dissatisfaction and opportunities for far right parties to either take over the conservative party like they have in the United States, or to rise as independent parties like they did in the UK and France. And I mean, right? So Macron didn't win because his policies are particularly popular, right? Macron won because both of the major parties in France experienced a spectacular collapse, and when really faced with a choice, France voted to stay in Europe, right? Right. So you've got Le Pen, who's this Eurosceptic and who is Islamophobic and anti-Semitic and sort of racist. She has fellow travelers in her party that are Nazis. Her dad was a Holocaust denier. Her dad founded the National Front Party that Le Pen now leads, right? You can see how when faced with a choice between Macron and Le Pen, that France chose a pro-European, pro-globalism agenda. But that doesn't mean that the French people are excited about these neoliberal policies that Hollande pursued as a socialist president and Macron promises to pursue now, right? Like I don't think that this is like strengthening the European left. I don't think that this is strengthening progressive movements.
I
in
think it's
Europe
quite
or
all
the rest
right.
of the world.
I guess that's where we disagree.
The neoliberal Macron law, but Macron was a finance minister and resigned from a government that has left its country with 10% unemployment, right? Like France isn't in like particularly great economic shape despite having had Macron as finance minister all this time.
Oh, hold on, AJ. Hold on. I'm sort of like no. Hold on a second. Like, first of all, France has never recovered from the recession, so it's not as if Macron's 2 years, were going to be enough to sort of change France. You know what I mean? He was economy minister for 2 years, and even if you believe that if you do believe that these labor reforms will make it easier to hire and fire people, which you kind of need in an economy, a good functioning economy anyway, it's going to take more than 6 months or a year for those effects to show up, right? Like that's kind of the nature of structural reforms. So, I mean, I guess I totally agree that Macron's election does nothing for the left, but I say the left has controlled France for like 30 or 40 years. What do the French people have for it?
That's 100% not true. That's 100% not true.
No, the socialists have control.
No, the socialists. No. So you've had. No, that's 100% not true. De Gaulle was conservative. Chirac was conservative. It hasn't been this like uninterrupted.
What I'm saying is like,
Mitterrand has had conservative prime ministers, right? And the prime minister mostly controls the
sure,
domestic
Sarkozy.
Agenda,
I agree.
Right? No, but no. I agree. But hold on. You haven't had like uninterrupted left wing control of France for the last 30 or 40 years.
There hasn't been sort of reform in France in 30 or 40 years. Like Sarkozy didn't push through much of reform. Certainly Hollande did this Macron law, but that, which is good and material, but it's just barely happened. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that you can do that are small and that are technical and technocrat in nature that can make it easier, for a business or for an employer or for whoever, right? And like one of the other things this Macron law did is it reformed competition law and the review of mergers when company A wants to buy company B. One of the things that it did, it said like effectively the competition review board or whatever their version of the Federal Trade Commission is has, effectively 85 days to review the merger. They can't, keep you in the dark.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
I don't think it is. They have 85 days to give you an answer. The answer can be no, but they have to give you one.
Look at the state of horizontal and vertical integration in the United States, right? Where the neoliberal reforms of the 1990s have allowed banking to expand, both vertically and horizontally, have caused consolidation in all of the airlines, consolidation in all of the telecom companies. Really, these sort of like, let's just hamstring our competition agency in reviewing these mergers. But these sort of like these like facially pro business reforms don't actually help people.
Well, so hold on a second. That's not so. In this particular instance, that's not what it is. It says you can say no. You just can't string people on forever, right? It doesn't prevent or change what you can do. So, it's a lot of these like little technocratic things that can give a little bit more certainty to a business when it wants to do A or B. It doesn't change what bureaucrats decide. It just creates different time frames, right?
I don't know, dude. We can revisit this episode in 3 or 4 years when we see like if France still has 10% unemployment or not. But I don't think there's like any particular reason to be excited for Macron's domestic agenda. I think it's actually sort of a blow for European left-wing movements.
So I guess that's where we disagree. I agree it's a blow for European left-wing movements. I don't think that's bad.
Okay. Well, okay. So I do actually have some nice things to say about Macron. There is a great article from Yanis Varoufakis, who was the Greek finance minister during the Greek debt crisis and renegotiations with Europe. Apparently, Macron was the only, basically the only adult in Europe who wanted to play ball with Greece in a way that was sort of
somewhat more fair.
More fair to Greece in that situation. I think that Greece's recovery has been sort of worse than the U.S. recovery from the Great Depression, and it actually has had like a lasting human toll. And I think, ultimately it will be the shape of European centrist parties in 20 years when people study it. What else did he do? During the election against Le Pen, he cleverly created a bunch of honeypot email accounts so that when the Russian hackers inevitably hacked into his emails, they came away with a lot of stuff that wasn't, that was like planted there sort of embarrassingly. So that was cool.
On that point, I read that article. It's an Ars Technica article. And I noticed just how much work they had to do this. It was just a lot of work to create all of these the fake data they had to put in. I mean, it was the documents that they were creating for these fake email accounts that were set out so that the hackers could go after them as opposed to real.
This is
documents.
Pretty impressive, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Like I mean, they were real enough where the hackers would be fooled into thinking that they were real documents, but they weren't, real documents, obviously.
Yeah.
And that takes some effort. You can't just like create fake documents on the fly.
Yeah, there are like some dope interviews with whoever did like the information security for Macron's campaign about like
the other question I wonder is this the state of election campaigning now? Like you have to have your own anti-hacking teams.
I think the answer
set
is
up
yes.
And, I mean that's
pretty sad.
Kind of sad because a lot of these people who at least currently run for office don't know much about technology.
Well, but federal campaigns are a matter of national security, right? Like the campaigns themselves are sort of like the fair and free election processes are a national security matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's totally reasonable to apply information security to those campaigns.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying I don't know how effective it'll be.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it will be. Maybe that's a software package that you'll buy that just creates like tons and tons of duds, But, Ben Sasse was talking about this yesterday. Ben Sasse is a Republican senator from Nebraska, and he was talking about how one of his big worries is, are these types of hacks going to become ubiquitous in like 2018 and 2020 at a congressional level, not just at a federal level? I mean,
yeah, of
course.
The lower the election, sure, you're not going to get as big returns as hacking like a presidential election.
Although, dog catcher, Tom, dog catcher.
Yeah. But the lower the level of a election, the less likely it is to go noticed, right?
Yeah.
And the more returns you might be able to get on that type of activity.
AJ, what do you think about so one of the other things that Macron did is he changed occupational licensing laws for notaries. So notaries are what is a notary exactly? I always forget. I mean, I know what it is, but I have trouble describing it.
Like a notary public?
Yeah.
I mean, a notary public is a person authorized by the government to administer oaths, right? So there are certain things that you sort of want you provide attestations for, like affidavits or certain contracts or something. I mean, every once in a while someone wants like a higher level of certainty that an oath has been administered to a person, that person's identity has been verified, and that's the role that notary publics play.
I think that's what I've always used them for, is just to attest to like, hey, this person is who they say they are. I have checked their ID, But anyway, so France had a licensing scheme for that, and the Macron law, dismantled that licensing scheme. He also
that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Yeah,
that sounds like a bad idea.
I don't know.
The entire idea behind having a licensed notary public is that the state is going to allow certain individuals and not other individuals the ability to attest that the person who signed this document is the person the document purports to be, and the person who signed the document swore whatever oath the document purports the person did, right? You have to have a pretty trust is implicit in that, right?
But there's tens of thousands of people that are, there's probably more notaries than there are people with like top secret clearance, of which there are like a million people. But
if you deregulate notary publics, then they're just some dudes with stamps.
Yeah.
I think it's the training process. I think either it was the training process or how hard it could be to become one. Let's see. I'm trying to pull up this Wall Street Journal article.
I don't know, dude. I agree with you that like occupational licensing is like kind of crazy overall, but I don't think that you should say, oh, just because occupational licensing is bad sometimes, that every neoliberal reform to any sort of occupational license is good.
Yeah. I mean, I think in this particular instance, like you need a third party to put the stamp of trust on a notary, right? Like that. I mean, the trust is all that makes that system work.
People care about this like half as much as they care about Jim Comey.
Yeah.
By the way, like we should
talk about Jim Comey?
I think there's one last thing to say. There's one last thing to say about the French election. I'm going to put some links to like 3 538 articles in the show notes. It's just some takeaway about how the far right movements, right wing populist movements, and neo-fascist movements in Europe are underperforming their polls lately, and the conventional wisdom about how to talk about these neo-fascist movements is moving polling averages. So I think that's interesting. I think people should click those articles.
Let me say one more thing. There was a cap on the number of people that could be highly paid notaries, or that could be notaries, period. And that's what he removed. Fine. He removed the cap.
Okay. Well, good for him.
So he
maybe removing the cap is
deregulate. Yeah.
No, that is deregulating.
He didn't like tackle occupational licensing.
Yeah, but
you're really overselling what he did there.
No, I don't know.
Okay, Jim Comey.
Sure.
Tom, you want to take it from the top?
I mean, Comey got fired.
Man, it's a good thing that conservatives cut unemployment benefits, because that's like the extra comeuppance for Comey.
Although he got fired, I don't think he would have been eligible for unemployment benefits. You can't.
Well, I guess it would depend if he was fired for cause, right?
I think he was fired for cause.
Oh, he was definitely fired for cause.
You read that Rosenstein memo?
Yeah, dude. The cause was either you're a bad FDI director or you are investigating me and I don't like it.
This may have like slipped under the radar, but Trump like explicitly told Lester Holt that the reason why he fired Jim Comey was because he wanted to put an end to the Russia investigation.
Yeah. I think it's worth reading that direct quote from Trump himself. Let me see if we can pull it up, because it's a really good quote.
But regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders also has who is the deputy press secretary.
Soon to be press secretary, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true, actually. Also said in a press briefing that they fired Comey because, quote, we want this to come to a conclusion. Referring to the Russia investigation.
So I think her statement was actually a little bit better for Trump, in the sense that she said she made it seem like the investigation wasn't going fast enough, and that was Comey's fault, and they actually wanted it to just speed up. So maybe that's marginally better. But what Trump said is like, I'm really surprised that like more people are not sort of talking about that as sort of explicit obstruction of justice. He's saying, I was thinking about it when I was going to fire him, and I thought this Russia thing is fake. Like, I mean, he's saying from a mental state perspective that this Russia thing and Comey were linked in his mind, and one led to the other.
Yeah, that sounds bad, right?
Yeah.
That's like bad.
I wish that
it seems bad.
I wish Lester Holt. Yeah, I wish like there had been a slightly better interviewer than Lester Holt, because I think they probably could have gotten him to admit it even more bluntly. You
want like Jack Frost to do it?
No, he's
not Jack Frost.
Is he still alive? Frost Nixon, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's Jack Frost, right?
Is it Jack? No, Jack's that's a snowman. I think that's a snowman. Yeah, that's a snowman.
Who is Frost Nixon? Who's that guy?
Yeah. Hold on. In all seriousness, though,
David Frost.
When you have a better interviewer like John Dickerson who presses the issue, Trump just walks out of the interview, right? Like we saw that with his last interview. So maybe it's good that Lester Holt isn't a quote unquote good interviewer, right? He just lets Trump talk, and if you give Trump enough rope, he'll hang himself.
I agree. I think the one thing Lester Holt could have done better there is he could have just made this about Trump's ego, and he could have been like, well, listen, I mean, you're the president of the United States, if I were president, I might think, who's the FBI director to investigate me? Like, where does he get off?
So let me talk a meta point about that. I wonder how much of that view, because if I were in his shoes, I might have done a very similar thing, right? Yeah. I wonder how much of that view is the lawyer in us talking, right? Because in a legal system, it's an adversarial system where the idea is you advocate for your side, and the truth will come out from two sides zealously advocating for their side, right? In journalism, that's not necessarily the case. In journalism, you're supposed to be looking for the truth, right? Like, so a journalist who isn't supposed to just go and get quotes from whatever news story or news in person who's has something newsworthy happen to them and just relay those quotes. They're supposed to try to figure out, okay, I know this person told me X, but is that really what happened? Can I check those facts? Is there another source that I can confirm? Can I compile all of these different sources and figure out, okay, is this really what happened? And then report on what really happened. You know what I mean?
I'm going to Tom's point, I'm going to highly recommend that people listen to the May 4th episode of the Slate Political Gabfest. John Dickerson, who had a pretty good interview with Trump about a week ago. He is also a co-host on Gabfest, and so they a good chunk of the episode is spent talking about Dickerson, how he prepared, and what was his thought process during the interview. And I think that that hearing John Dickerson speak from his own experience interviewing Trump, I think really speaks to Tom's point and reinforces what Tom is getting at.
Was that? I don't think I've listened to that episode. Was that after the interview?
Yes.
Okay, so does he talk about Trump walking out?
Yeah, he talks about it. He talks. So the crazy thing is like how bizarre it was, right? So like Trump doesn't like walk out; he just sort of walks over to the other side of the room, and then they're both sort of standing there in the same room, right? And then Trump's like, "Oh, this interview's over," and Dickerson's like, "Oh, okay." And so Dickerson like leaves the Oval Office. It's like super awkward. There's no like goodbye. Mm-hmm. He's just like, "Oh, okay," and then they like continue the interview later the same day.
Yeah, that's weird.
Dude, I'm gonna take it back to Macron. I'm doing it, dude. This is the Wall Street Journal.
Dude, don't take it back to Macron. No, don't
dude.
Do
No. It's good. You can edit it in or out later if you want.
I'm gonna edit it out.
All right, dude. I don't care. So as part of like passing his law, so this is from the Wall Street Journal.
Oh my God.
Even before taking his bill to the floor of the lower house, the 37-year-old economy minister spent 82 hours debating in a parliamentary commission to examine 1,967 amendments, of which 495 were adopted. On the floor, Macron endured another 111 hours of debate, faced 2,850 further amendments, and adopted 559. That's
good for him.
That's some real dedication.
Seems good. Mm-hmm. Okay, Comey.
Yeah, what about him?
Comey.
Oh, he got fired,
dude. So, I think I don't know if I would say Comey was good, but I don't think he was terrible. Number one. And number two, I think the discussion should really be not on Comey's goodness or badness. It should be entirely about the reason why Trump fired Comey. That's kind of my big point.
When you're talking about framing the debate, right? Like, yeah. Richard, when you start a topic like, I think Comey wasn't terrible. I think he had some good spots or whatever you said, right?
Yeah.
But we shouldn't be talking about that, right? Like how. When the premise of your question starts with this loaded,
no.
value judgment on Comey's job, right? Like, and then you expressly, it's like telling people don't think about the pink elephant, right?
No. Let me answer that, I guess. I think we're having a bit of a meta conversation, or at least I'm having a bit of a meta conversation, where I'm saying the debate, we can all have our opinions on Comey. I kind of gave you mine. Obviously, you will give yours. And I'm not saying you shouldn't give yours.
And you just said don't give you... No. That's exactly what you said.
No.
Right?
No.
Like you said, I have an opinion on Comey, but I don't think we should talk about our opinions on Comey. Let's talk about this.
Okay, well, All right, well then edit that part out, because my opinion on Comey really, I don't think it's relevant. I don't think my opinion or anybody's opinion.
So wait, let's stop having a conversation about our meta conversation. Let's just have our meta conversation. Basically, what Rucha, the debate that Rucha is trying to hash out is basically, should you think one thought at a time, right? Our only thought now should be about how awful it is that Trump fired Comey, or can you think two thoughts at the same time? Is there space in public?
Let me
discourse?
add to that.
Well, let me finish. Is there space in the public discourse to think two thoughts at the same time? The first thought being that Trump is bad, and the second thought being that Comey is bad.
Well, let me add to that. Actually, I think the frame through which Trump and his sort of supporters want you to have this argument is on Comey's inherent goodness, badness, etc. I think that having it through that frame, or even partially through that frame, lets him win the argument, because I think he can say very adequately, as he has said so far, listen, you guys hated Comey. I didn't like Comey. Nobody liked Comey.
But isn't that transparent?
I think it is, but
I feel like that's blatant. Like, that's obviously transparent, right? Like, that's something like anyone can or should be able to see through.
Well, I don't think I think most of his supporters will latch onto that, and if they see Democrats arguing through that exact same lens, it ends up being a poor argumentative technique, I guess is what I would say.
But the more and more we live with Trump, the more I go back to that original statement of Trump's, that his core base of 35% could see Trump shooting someone on Fifth Avenue and still support him the next day, right? Like, I don't know.
I think this is about the middle, though. I think this is about a lot of the people that are in the middle, or maybe the country club Republicans, which I know you guys don't believe in or have given up on, but
I sort of don't really care if I'm indulging the 30% of Trump voters who are going to vote for Trump, no matter what I say. Like, I don't really care if I indulge them or not, because it doesn't make a difference.
I think you're also potentially indulging a much broader group of people that are, I think, more likely to agree with you if you focus on the reasons why Trump fired Comey. Which I think more
Comey
people
was bad, though, right? Like, I think there's room in our podcast, maybe not in our national discourse, but
Agreed.
On our podcast, Comey was actually highly bad, right?
I think, I guess I'll defend Comey in the sense that I don't like what he did in the Hillary Clinton situation. I think that was definitely bad. I think he was actually a little bit of a showboater, but maybe not to the extent that Donald Trump is, or a grandstander to that level either. But I think he was the one independent. He was independent, and I think.
Yeah, but he was independent of being good.
I don't think that's true.
Well, okay.
He did a thing that I know you disagreed with and I disagreed with, but I think he was an independent advocate for the FBI and was not going to be politicized, by someone else. Now, I think you might say somewhat rightly, well, he did end up politicizing something. And I guess I would just say at least he didn't do it, at the behest of someone else, which you could easily see a Rudy Giuliani or a Chris Christie or sadly even a Rod Rosenstein do.
Do you want to talk about this Garland thing? This Garland thing, I think, Dave Weigel has, I think, a pretty good post up for the Washington Post. The title is "The Merrick Garland for FBI Scheme Shows Why Liberals Lose," and I don't know. You want to start with the background and then talk about the thing?
Talk about it, dude.
Okay, so Mike Lee has been floating this proposal that Trump should nominate Merrick Garland to be the next FBI director. Merrick Garland is presently a judge on the D.C. Court of Appeals. It's a lifetime appointment to the second most powerful federal court in the country after the Supreme Court. And the Mike Lee floated this idea, and then immediately Amy Klobuchar, who is the senator from Minnesota, the senior senator from Minnesota, latched onto this idea as though it might be a good idea, and then some other Democrats are sort of falling in line. Anyway, this any person who has supported this proposal has to be the dumbest person I've ever seen in my life, right? I mean, it's so obviously a scheme to create a vacancy on the DC court, while at the same time removing Garland as this sort of avatar, this like living, breathing embodiment of Republican congressional dysfunction. That like I don't understand how what any Democrat thinks is good about this, right? Roy Blunt when asked about it by the Washington Examiner, said it would create a vacancy in the important DC circuit. So maybe I like it better the more I think about it. And then Dave Weigel writes afterwards, well, yeah. I don't know. Tom, what was your reaction when you first heard about this?
Yeah, I had a similar reaction. I just have any, when we initially talked about this, I think the framing of it was, I can't believe Democrats are actually entertaining this idea. And my thought was, what sane Democrat is entertaining this idea? Are there Democrats actually entertaining this idea that would support Trump appointing Merrick Garland to FBI director and then giving him an appointment on the DC court?
The two most notable Democrats I've seen supporting this are Larry Summers and Amy Klobuchar. There have been a few other Democrats that have, like Tom Udall and Dick Blumenthal, who have said like, oh, Garland would make a good FBI director, but they haven't gone quite so far as like proposing that Trump actually nominate him.
No, I'm sure Garland would be good at any job he does, right? Like he seems like a competent individual, but the idea that you would remove him from the DC circuit and put him as FBI director at the serving at the pleasure of the Trump administration is far-fetched.
Richard, where are you at on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think Merrick Garland would make a great FBI director, but I also don't see why he would or should do it. He would have to love his country a lot, but I think this. I think he would.
I don't think so.
But I think even if he loved his country the most you could love a country, he would better express that love by staying on the DC circuit. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think
the most good that he can do would be on the DC circuit.
Well, I think it's
compared to FBI director.
This actually is the same reason why I think that like a lot of people on the left get really obsessed with moving important figures in the party into the executive branch. That like, oh, like Elizabeth Warren should leave the Senate to be Hillary Clinton's vice president or whatever. When you realize that like actually Elizabeth Warren is sort of has her own little fiefdom, and she has her own little deanship within the Senate, and she's immensely powerful and important in doing that. And to make her, some people are like really good at the job that they're doing, and they serve the party best by being where they are. And I feel that way about Merrick Garland.
Yeah, I guess I'm not thinking about service to the party. I'm thinking more about service to the country.
I said party when I meant country. You know what I mean.
Now it's my turn.
No. But people can better serve the country where they are. You can laugh at me now.
I think Merrick Garland could be a fantastic FBI director. I just don't think he could be for President Trump, because I think the conclusion that I've come to, which maybe more people are coming to, which I think is a conclusion AJ and Tom came to many weeks ago, or if not months ago, was that it's just not possible, it's just highly unlikely that you can do an honorable job serving a completely dishonorable person.
Oh, that's true. I have said that on the podcast before.
Yeah. I think I sort of
fact, one of the
maybe
themes...
not agreed with you guys, but I think I do now.
Well, yeah, I think the point I tried to make before is that all of Trump's fellow travelers find it totally debasing and lowering at some point or the other. If you look at like Chris Christie or Ted Cruz or whoever it is who has sort of sold their soul, Reince Priebus.
I think Chris Christie was the first to feel that pain.
God, you could see it on his face. You could see it. It was like on his face.
He was the first to endorse Trump and the first to feel that pain.
Oh, man.
You know who hasn't? So the only people that haven't felt this pain, I think, are people that are way incompetent, and working for Trump will be the greatest thing that they can ever do in their lives.
Like Spicy?
Yeah. Or Rudy Giuliani.
KT McFarland?
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani, that's a good one.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's only people that like are just like their reputations or their talents are just so tattered to begin with that there's not really much bad that could happen to them, right? That this is, definitely not a step down and likely a step up. And that's why I kind of was talking about like who hasn't befallen this fate yet, and I think the generals haven't yet, but maybe they're
except
the
for
only
Flynn.
one. Well,
Flynn's a general.
I
know, just like Madison, McMaster, and stuff.
Yeah. And I would argue that Flynn was pretty disgraceful before he joined the Trump administration. So like he falls into the category of people that this is the best thing that could happen to them. Certainly not.
Man, You know who got real screwed? Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort had this like highly. Paul Manafort had this like
Poor
highly
Paul
lucrative political consulting / money laundering scheme for like Eastern European authoritarian movements.
Hey, it was beyond Eastern Europe. I mean, I think he had some clients in the former Stans as well. I mean, it was quite a.
Yeah. But you know what I mean,
Yeah.
right? Like these like former Soviet countries where he like had this super lucrative money laundering /
he had cornered that market.
scheme. That, by the way, that's like a one-stop shop, right? Like I'll launder your money and run your polls. Like that's like like that's just customer service. Anyway, Paul Manafort's like under FBI investigation now. He could have flown under the radar if he hadn't hooked up with Trump.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, Paul Manafort. But I think the other thing that may come out, if there are tapes, I really hope there are Trump tapes. I really, really hope there are. Because I bet there are tapes of him and Roger Stone talking, and Roger Stone being like, you got to do something about this Comey guy. This Russia investigation is mad annoying.
Right before we started recording, I read the most insane article about this. Like, here, why don't you go over this whole taping thing while I pull up this article?
Tom, do you want to do it?
Thing?
What whole
no, that's just that.
No.
That's just a stupid thing Trump
article.
said on Twitter. So Trump threatened Comey to and in the auspices of Comey better testify honestly in quotes, because there might be tapes out there of what was actually said between Trump and Comey, and if I were a betting man, I would say like I hope there are tapes, because I think that would show Trump for who he is, right?
Okay. So Mark Fisher for the Washington Post wrote, for others who have had regular dealings with Trump through the years, there was something viscerally real about the threat implied by the president's tweet. And then he wrote, talking on the phone with Donald was a public experience, said O'Donnell, author of a book about his former boss. You never know who else was listening. Last May, as 3 Washington Post reporters interviewed Trump by phone about his finances, Trump pushed back against the question about his use of the pseudonym John Miller when he talked to some reporters in the 1980s. Suddenly, the line went dead. The Post reporters called back and reached Graff, Trump's executive assistant. Quote, "Yeah, I heard you got disconnected," Graff said. "I heard some of it, though. Boy, those are some really negative questions. Do you have any good questions to ask him?" Last spring, when 2 Post reporters visited Trump in his office for another interview, Trump, in the middle of telling a story about how he demolished the Manhattan landmark that had stood where Trump Tower is now, asked his guests if they would like something to drink. In the same quiet voice in which he'd been conducting the interview, Trump said, quote, "Okay, 2 waters and a Coke." The interview resumed, and less than a minute later, a secretary walked in with the drinks. No one other than the reporters and Trump had been in the office, and Trump never signaled the drink request to anyone outside the office.
Nice.
Huh.
Isn't that crazy?
So there might actually be tapes.
Yeah, dude.
Dude, if the Democrats could only get their hands on these tapes, because it's gonna have. I mean, because he's constantly railing about Russia and this investigation. He's going to have talked out loud to himself or to others. Maybe I should fire Comey. Like, maybe that's how I make this Russia investigation go away.
I mean, the things he says in public, like you can only imagine what he would say in private closed doors.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, I guess we know what he says in private closed doors from the Access Hollywood tapes.
Oh God.
Oh, the one where he grabs women by the.
Yeah, that one.
AJ, we're trying to maintain a family brand.
No, it's just that when you're a star, women let you grab them by the. They just let you do it.
I guess I wouldn't know anything about that.
Well, I mean, maybe the podcast will get big.
Yeah,
maybe.
But just Tom, I would not do that regardless of how big the podcast is.
Do we want to do Supreme Court? I think we got enough here. Do you have any Supreme Court ready to go?
Yeah, I've got one case if you want to do it, or I mean, it's not.
Rooch, where are you at?
We can also.
Let's do it, dude. Let's do the case.
Okay.
I love this segment.
So, like last week, this is a personal jurisdiction case, and this case is Bristol-Myers Squibb Company versus the Superior Court of California.
Oh, I'm with the Superior Court.
Are you?
Well, they're superior.
Breach, do you want to make an initial prediction before we talk about the facts or the law?
Yes, I do. Who are the? Is there Superior Court? Who else is there? Who's the other side that I can choose? So
it's Bristol-Myers Squibb.
Oh,
Bristol-Myers versus
Bristol-Myers.
Okay,
I choose Bristol-Myers.
All right. So
now give me some facts.
So here's what happens. All right. So this is, like I said, this is another case that involves personal jurisdiction. If you remember from our previous episode, before a court in another state can haul you, AJ, into their courts in Oklahoma, they have to have what's called personal jurisdiction over you. And the entire question is, what does it take in order to get personal jurisdiction? This case comes out of California, where the plaintiffs have alleged that they suffered severe side effects of a drug called Plavix, which is made by Bristol-Myers Squibb and then distributed in California by another company called McKesson Corporation. So the plaintiffs have sued both BMS, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and McKesson Corporation, right? There are 86 plaintiffs in this suit that all live in California and took the drug in California. There are 575 plaintiffs in this suit that live outside the state and took the drug outside the state, but they've all gotten together in this state court in California and are suing Bristol-Myers Squibb and McKesson, right? And of course, BMS, Bristol-Myers Squibb, comes in and says, whoa, you don't have personal jurisdiction over me because I've never actually sold any drugs in California. I've only sold them to McKesson, who sold them to these California folks. And there are 575 individuals in this lawsuit who aren't even from California. WTF, right? And in order to understand this case, you have to know that there are two types of personal jurisdiction. One is called general jurisdiction, where if you have continuous and systematic contacts in a state, so if you live in a state, if you sell in a state, if you have, for example, lobbyists in a state, then a state might be able to exercise jurisdiction over you because it's not unfair to expose you to litigation in that state because you have so many contacts in that state, right? The other is specific jurisdiction, which is when you go into a state and you do something bad, well, a state can haul you into the courts of that state because you chose to go into that state. The case arises out of your bad conduct in the state, right? So this case is about specific jurisdiction, not general jurisdiction. So the California Supreme Court below assumed that, or not assumed, but found that Bristol did not have general and systematic contacts in California. But they said, look, you sold these drugs to a distributor. You had a contract with this distributor, who's also a defendant in this case, to sell these drugs in California. And because you did that gives rise to this lawsuit, right? There are these 86 individuals who took the drugs in California and who are injured in California. The question presented at the Supreme Court is whether selling a drug to a distributor that you know will sell that drug in the state of California is sufficient contact such that California can exercise specific personal jurisdiction over you. Bristol-Myers Squibb argues, no, it's not, because we don't have any personal relationship with any of the plaintiffs. 85% of the plaintiffs did not take the drugs in California. Yeah, they took our drug in other states. And yeah, let them sue in other states if they want, but they shouldn't be able to sue in California, or they shouldn't be able to haul us into California. And, the only relationship with California is our distributor, who's a California corporation. The plaintiffs respond, yes, but BMS markets and does research in California. This researches this specific drug in California, and while
good.
California residents don't make up the majority of the plaintiffs, the California courts still have a substantial interest in the outcome of this lawsuit. Right. So again, the entire issue is whether the court can exercise specific personal jurisdiction over Bristol-Myers Squibb because of this, marketing scheme to sell drugs in California.
This is, honestly, I would have found that there was general jurisdiction, because you think of like a company like Bristol-Myers Squibb, right? So our listeners may or may not know, it's like one of the largest kind of drug companies in the world.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how many hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of revenue they have related to sales in California, right? I'm sure it's, California is the 5th largest economy in the world, so how could they not have a ton of revenue coming from California? Also, the fact that they're, I'm sure, constantly lobbying the California legislature, on Medicare or not Medicare, but Medicaid policies. I mean, I just feel like if you're a drug company, you sell drugs everywhere. You shouldn't be surprised if you get hauled into court anywhere that your drugs are sold and consumed, right? Like, it just seems like totally ridiculous. I mean, their argument I would have found general jurisdiction, but I think on specific jurisdiction, I think it's just so clear. I mean, they're doing research there. So why do you guys think the court took this case? Like, do you think is there a circuit split issue, do you think, Tom? Or like, what do you think?
I think they took a series of cases about jurisdiction because there's some issues that are popping up at the lower courts, right? Like we had that previous case about the folks in Montana wanting to sue the railroad company, BNSF Railroad Incorporated, and that was a general jurisdiction case. And that
the patent case was a jurisdiction case?
The patent case, right? Well, sort of. It was more of a
venue case, I guess, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
but it was thematically similar.
Yeah, it was a venue case, but yeah, it's thematically similar, right? And the BNSF Railroad case, I think, was argued the day before this case, Bristol-Myers Squibb, or close, or maybe even the day of, I forget. But I think that's probably why they took these sort of groups of cases, is because they're feeling like jurisdiction needs a little attention, personal jurisdiction needs a little attention.
I think it's going to be 5-4 on behalf of Bristol-Myers Squibb.
So you think 5-4 that the California does not have jurisdiction?
What did the court below say?
The court below was the California Supreme Court, which said that while there is no general jurisdiction over Bristol-Myers Squibb, there is specific jurisdiction over this company because they do market, they do research, and they do sell these drugs to this company or this.
Yeah, I agree with Ruchit.
5-4 BMS.
Another possibility, which I'm not going to say is going to happen because I already made my prediction, but is they find on something like 6-3 for there being general or specific jurisdiction as it relates to the California plaintiffs, but they say to all the other plaintiffs, you need to go to your own state and you need to make your own jurisdictional
that would still
there.
be a result for Bristol-Myers Squibb, though.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it would be
because that would bust the lower court's opinion.
Yeah.
So AJ, you're at 5-4 BMS.
Yeah.
Me too, actually. So I think it's funny. We're all in agreement that it'll be a close case for the corporation.
Because isn't jurisdiction a constitutional issue, not a statutory one?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a due process issue, right? Like it would defend due process for a court to. You're not getting the correct proper process, the due process, if you're dragged halfway across the country to a jurisdiction you've never, had any dealings with or contacts with.
Because that's what's happening to poor Bristol-Myers Squibb.
Yeah, I know.
California, we've never even heard of this state, What do they do over there? I think if we had a Supreme Court that was a little bit younger, such court they might be more evolved on their views of personal jurisdiction, which is that, this isn't 1777, okay, where you bear some extreme expense if you're hauled into court, in a faraway land, right? Like you live in New York and then some guy wants to sue you in Virginia and it takes like 12 days for you to get there, on country roads, you might get killed along the way, like you might get typhoid. Like there's all kinds of dangerous things that could happen to you, right?
It
like
ain't
here,
the Oregon Trail.
Yeah, it's not the Oregon Trail, right? Like here's what's going to happen here. Like United's going to have to fly their that these Bristol-Myers Squibb is going to have to fly their representatives on a United plane, and they're going to get like dragged off the plane. Like how hard can it be, I think some of this personal jurisdiction jurisprudence is just kind of devoid of a relationship to
outmoded.
reality. Yeah, it's just not. Yeah, it's devoid of reality in this day and age.
Shall we do sidebars?
Let's do it, dude.
AJ, you want to go?
Yeah, I got a good one. My sidebar this week is the Texas Freedom Caucus.
I thought our sidebars were supposed to be uplifting.
Well, no, this is actually pretty interesting. So the sort of the Tea Party wing of the Texas, particularly in the House of the Texas legislature, have organized this year for the first time under the name the Freedom Caucus or the Texas Freedom Caucus. But they this past week was the deadline this session for House bills to be voted out before if they're going to be considered by the Senate. And in what has come to be called the Mother's Day Massacre, the Texas Freedom Caucus killed over 100 bills by preventing them from being voted out by the midnight deadline on Thursday of last week. This would be Thursday, the May 11th, 2017. And then, okay, so this part is actually not uplifting. Freedom Caucus members also used Thursday night to derail legislation ahead of the midnight deadline to pass the House. As the clock ticked and Freedom Caucus members used tactic after tactic to stall, other lawmakers watched as the chances dimmed for their bills to pass. State Rep Drew Stringer, R. Munster, delivered a tearful speech begging the chamber to hurry up so it could get to a bill on experimental stem cell treatment that could benefit his wife, who suffered a spinal cord injury. The legislation ultimately passed with minutes to spare. So sort of, it's nice to know that, all politics is local. And so we have a Freedom Caucus, just like the big boys.
I guess that's what we were missing.
Yeah. Just 12 people.
Just 12 people. But anyway, the
Great
Mother's Day
title, by the
Massacre.
way.
The Mother's Day Massacre
Great-
was like
great title.
Great title. Pretty funny. You should also Google the Memorial Day Massacre.
What is that?
It happened like 10 years ago. Our Representative Arlene Wolgamuth.
Oh, was this chubbing in 2009? This was chubbing in 2009, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't chubbing. It was a point of order. It was a point of order that prevented. She was like real mad. A bill of hers got killed, and she raised a point of order against the entire calendar committee output for the day. Like the notice that the calendar committee had posted was deficient, and so she raised a point of order against the entire legislative agenda for the day.
And what happened?
And it was sustained by the parliamentarian. An entire day's worth of bills died.
Nice.
Like it ended up resulting in a called session.
Wow.
That was the Memorial Day Massacre. Exciting times at the legislature. Hashtag Texas Ledge.
This was in 97.
Oh, this is a long time ago, dude. So, Tom, do you want me to go or do you want to go?
It doesn't matter. I can go. My sidebar is Apple has this new page called How to Shoot with Your iPhone 7. And I mean, it's specific to the iPhone 7, but it gives pretty good advice for really any phone shooting. When people ask me what kind of camera to get, I generally say like your iPhone is going to be, or your phone is going to be good enough for the vast majority of circumstances in which you need to shoot. Like if you're looking to shoot like in low light situations or sometimes indoors. Those are the situations where you might want a better camera, right? And all of this advice that they post is, I mean, it's good advice, and it's advice that would help you shoot in those types of scenarios. Like, for example, how to shoot a sunset silhouette, or how to shoot a backlit subject, how to shoot a bold and simple image, how to shoot a unique angle, or how to shoot with street light. Like they're like 2 second, or not 2 second, like they're like 30-second videos. They're entertaining to watch.
That's
I guess.
Cool, dude.
In the sense that you get.
Well, I'm learning something from this video. I'm watching a video and I'm learning something from it.
Yeah, like I mean, they're super educational.
Did you know that when you tap to focus, you can slide up and down for exposure comp?
I did not, and I learned that. I
saw this in this video.
Yeah, me too. It's cool.
This is dope, dude.
It is. So,
dude, this is really great.
How to shoot with a selfie with
how
the
to
timer.
Shoot a great portrait.
How to shoot without flash. How to capture a unique angle.
Vertical pano.
Interesting.
That's pretty cool. How to shoot a close up. Yeah, no, like, it's great advice. Like it's great. What I love about it, it's great advice not just for shooting with your iPhone, but like shooting in general.
Why did it take this long?
Okay, this video is telling you to try Dutch angles. I don't like this video.
Take it up with Apple.
These videos are dope. I'm super into this. Rich, what's yours?
Oh, dude, mine is the cheapness of politicians. So I love articles about political figures that are like really cheap. So this article is about the cheapness of Richard Burr, who is, I guess, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee that is investigating contacts between the Trump campaign and Russia and all that other stuff. So whatever, there's politics. But Mr. Burr buys dress shirts at Costco. He goes without socks around the Capitol. He drives a moldering gray Volkswagen Thing convertible, known around Washington for its collage of political bumper stickers and unreliable roof. Isn't that the ugliest thing on earth? Asked Senator John McCain. Mr. Burr's fellow North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis had a more targeted complaint. He needs to get a roof on it if he's going to ask me to ride in a snowstorm, which he has done. So if you're interested in other politicians that are very cheap, you should Google the image of Gary Locke buying a Starbucks latte with a coupon as he was leaving Seattle to go become ambassador to China. He's like literally on a plane, or he's about to get on a plane to go become U.S. ambassador to China under President Obama, and he's like at a Starbucks using a coupon.
I got one for you. I got in this genre. I read an article last year around Thanksgiving time that is off the chain. The title of the article is "Michael Dukakis would very much like your turkey carcass." The article apparently, so in Brookline, Massachusetts, where former governor of Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis lives, he regularly gives out his address so that people can come by at the end of Thanksgiving and drop off their turkey carcass. And he keeps them in the freezer. And once a week, he makes a big pot of turkey soup.
Wow. That's even better than. So my favorite governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney. Oh
my God. Mitt Romney's not on brand for us, dude.
Dude, that's my point. Our brand extends beyond liberals that agree with you two. So I love the story about Mitt Romney, how his one or two or three of his five sons were out on like a boat, and they dropped the anchor, and then I guess somehow lost the anchor, and so they came back and they were like, "Dad, we lost the anchor," and they're like, "It's not a big deal," and he's like, "No, we're gonna go find that thing." We're not wasting money on buying a new anchor. And so he took his family, he took like the other kids, and they found the anchor. Then this is another story that wasn't.
Well, it sounds like his two kids are just lazy.
Yeah, well, yeah. But then another good Mitt Romney story, which was told to me by someone that I know, was so apparently Mitt Romney's so the Romney family grew up next to this other family that the person I'm talking about knows. And so there was a divorce happening in this other family. And so I guess Ann Romney heard about it or something like that. And so I guess the wife was moving out of the house and the husband was keeping the house or whatever. And the Anne was like, well, we'll just we're gonna help you move. Like I'll send Mitt and the boys over, and they'll move you out. Like, don't worry about it. And she was like, no, it's not a big deal. Like, I'm just gonna pay somebody or whatever. And she's like, no, like, it's fine. Like, don't pay anybody. Like, we're gonna do it. And so that Saturday or whatever, Mitt Romney and all 5 of his sons show up at this lady's house at like 7 a.m. and they're like, all right, let's move.
I got to read you something from this Dukakis article. Mike Dukakis said, quote, "It all started when my dear wife, after 23 years of marriage, and she was a good cook, I must say, one day she said, 'That's it. I'm not cooking any longer.' Just like that. At the time, the only thing I knew how to make was French toast. So I was confronted with the choice, starve or start cooking. So I've been doing all the cooking the last 29 years. I should also add one of our favorite purchases at Costco is rotisserie chicken. They sell them for $4.95. Kitty and I must get 10 meals out of them."
I love this. I think maybe we should do an episode, everything we know about the cheapness of politicians.
You sold it as if like now in France you no longer have to be state approved in order to notarize official documents.
Yeah, you sort of oversold the extent of that reform.
Maybe so. Hold on a second. There's more. There's also new fees. He lowered the fees. That's another thing.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh my God.
I know you guys don't care about this stuff, but this is like this is actually what
fees.
I mean, listen, this actually changes
the fees.
Changes things.
Tom,
you know.
Hey Tom, the fees are lower.
I mean,
Well,
I think it's easy to laugh about, but it impacted these notaries enough to the point where they were protesting in the streets. The first ever public protest by notaries. Hundreds of notaries.
There were dozens of them. Dozens.
Apparently, to acquire a property, you have to pay a notary something like 1%, and so he lowered that very little, but he lowered it. You know. I mean, it's kind of nuts that you have to pay somebody to attest to your documents, and you have to pay them 1% of the transaction
Yeah,
price.
percentage
That's insane.
of that is insane. Like that should be a flat fee.
Yeah. So he only lowered it a little bit, but my point is that I think we talk about, well, what's so bad about socialism? Well, this is a small example of something that.
But that's not.
No, it is. Is there a country more social? No. Is there a country more socialist than France? Like
Venezuela?
You're throwing up an example of another greatly functioning country, by the way, AJ.
Yeah, I don't think the notaries are like seizing the means of production here.
No. I think there is. I think what it is it's entrenching the power of labor.
Your proposition that a few hundred like notaries having a bad law in their favor is some sort of seizing the means of production is like facially ridiculous. Like.
No.
You know what I mean?
Hold on a second. No. Let me talk. Let me talk for a second, because like you guys are mocking me, which is fine. Since you don't think anything bad happens in socialism, I guess. It's all okay with you, man. Like left-leaning governments, no problem. And anything that you want to do to reform them, you can't have it. No. France is an example of socialism today. It is. I mean, this is why Hillary Clinton lost, by the way. You guys. Like.
No, I don't live in Michigan. I'm not why Hillary Clinton lost. I don't live in Michigan. I'm sorry, Ruja. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
No, you didn't hurt my feelings. I think honestly, you. I mean, I don't want to hurt your feelings either, but I think you revealed why liberals lose. I mean, honestly,
no, dude,
no, you did.
Like,
you ridicule people that don't agree with you. Like you do.
Just you, Richard. I just ridicule you.